I just want to put a shout out to the TEDx talks this morning. There's a lot of emotion in those talks. There's a lot of feelings, and I felt that was very significant for a technology-based sort of organization that we're talking about feelings. Usually those things are kind of put aside as less important, but it turns out those are more important because they affect the way you do things. They affect your ability to see new things. And in particular, I think that feelings are an example of something that is it's part of us. It's who we are. It's built in. I'm going to speak to you about something else that is built in. It's our ability to see, and something that is partially built in, which is our ability to draw or to render something that we can then look at. So I'm calling this Draw a Line Through It. Concept sketches to visualize your ideas. I want to leave you with a message that anyone can do this. You don't have to be an artist. You don't need special training. What you need is a sensitivity to the way that your mind processes information and the way your eyes work. I'm going to need a clicker. Okay, so I draw, and this is a cocktail napkin that I drew on as we arrive here in Florida. You can tell where my mind is at. This is what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about the beach. I'm thinking about the drinks I'm going to enjoy with you all later. And I'm rendering this on a cocktail napkin. That's just kind of what I do, but it's also significant in that it's something I can do. It's accessible. You know, a piece of paper, a scrap of paper. I actually was also, I wanted to bring this out. If you don't believe I draw on things all the time, here's a scrap of paper from the bar last night. Aman was there. And this is the sort of thing that is very significant to my practice because it enables me to very quickly put an idea out there in condensed form. There's a phrase, if you can fit it on a cocktail napkin, you probably understand it. Well, if you can't fit it on a cocktail napkin, maybe that's a lot of ideas to think through. You need to bring it down. And so I want to talk with you about how you get your ideas out there in a way that's going to enable you to achieve better success in building a system, solving a problem, visualizing something for your work, or even in your life. Now, I'm an artist. Outside of Twin, I have a studio practice, and I'm showing you an example of my artwork here. I can render things. I ought to be able to. I spent 3 years in art school and am significantly in debt for that. But I render things in all sorts of medium. This is a pencil sketch of a mountain, a desert. Usually that's actually this big, so it's really strange to see it that large. I do large works. To give you an idea of how big, that's a 7-foot drawing with Sharpie on butcher paper in my studio in Brooklyn. I sometimes add color. That's watercolor on it. And if I'm given enough time, I will work up my drawings into something like this. This is not a drawing, it's an oil painting of a nuclear test site in the desert sands of Nevada. That's the sort of lighthearted subject I like to put into my paintings. But there's a high degree of aestheticism and a refined, I spent a lot of time on this, and I can get very detailed, and I can make it very convincing and very beautiful, but that's not where the ideas come from. That's not where I have to start. I can't start with the canvases on the wall. I start from my sketchbook. Again, we're seeing these at about 5 times normal size, but I draw on my sketchbook whatever ideas are coming to my mind. And you can see some of the ideas are going through my head, and then you might come across this and say, well, I don't know what that is. I can't really tell what Eric is thinking. It looks like a bunch of scribbles to me. Well, that's okay, because this drawing isn't for you. I'm showing it to you now, but this drawing is for me. This is a tool which I use to think about things. It's not meant for presentation. It's meant for me to analyze or to envision or to work something out. And as I am able to do that on a piece of paper, it's significant. I can use a pencil and paper. It's quick. It's cheap. It's something I've been doing since I was 3. You probably have been doing something similar since you were 3. You probably learned to draw or scribble with crayons before you learned to write. That means you're thinking about how to draw and how to process information. You might not think of yourself as an artist, but you have these cool tools. They're built in, like our feelings. It's a system we can draw upon. Seeing is believing. And if you believe something, you can actualize it. You can make it happen. So there's a straight line between being able to see it and being able to make it real. We are visual creatures. Our brains are built out of neural circuitry that relies on vision. And so I want to encourage you to think about how you can take advantage of that in your own practice. When you take a pen to paper, you do more than just render an image. You make it your own. It's part of who you are, and you might find yourself doing things to it that, make you think. They provoke thoughts. You can also hand it to other people, have them annotate it, bring it back to you. You can turn it upside down. A piece of paper is a wonderful thing. And if you do this, I'm convinced that you can create ideas that will change the world. Well, that's a big concept. Okay, you're looking at me skeptically. I see some eyes. Really, Eric? Something on a cocktail napkin can change the world? Well, here's an example of something that changed the world, drawn on the 15th century equivalent of a cocktail napkin. This is by Copernicus, who proposed that the Earth rotated around the sun, and we were no longer the center of the universe. This is a dangerous idea at the time. Copernicus actually didn't want it published, and it would eventually get some other people in a lot of trouble with the Inquisition. It's an idea that changed the world through visualization. You can see this, you know what he's talking about. I want to show you another drawing. This predates Copernicus by 5 centuries. This is by an Islamic astronomer, philosopher named al-Biruni. Now, I can't read medieval Arabic. I assume that's what that is. If someone can correct me, please feel free. But I can tell what this is about. I can see where he's going with this because I understand the language. There are lines, there are shades, there's something going around. It's the moon going around the earth. The sun is on the left. And I understand this because it's a universal language. It's built in. It's almost, we get it almost for free. And you don't need to be an artist. You don't need to be a specialist. You can read these diagrams, and you can see al-Biruni was a smart guy. He knew what Copernicus was talking about 5 centuries before. We just have forgotten him because we're in the West and he's in the East. I want to give you a couple examples of drawings that changed the world. This is by Leonardo da Vinci. You might know him as the Florentine painter. And Da Vinci was notable for thinking about the ideal. The ideal human being for him was a man. He presented this idea by inscribing the person inside of a circle and a square to sort of indicate the regularity with which he thought of the universe. But I'm going to show you this drawing for another purpose. I believe this is a drawing with failure in it. I know it looks good. He's quite a skilled draftsman. I'm not going to take that away. But if you look at the person on the man, it looks like his torso is kind of stretched. It's like there's extra vertebrae in there, and somehow Da Vinci has decided that his idea was important enough. He would stretch this person to kind of distort reality. And when we see this from contemporary standards, we understand that's interesting. The failure is what tells you there's something else to learn. The problem in the drawing, this is something drawing can do by visualizing a problem or a failure. You can then build off that, and we now understand the world in very different terms. Moving to the 20th century. Richard Feynman, the great quantum physicist, was a very active drawer. He liked to visualize things because physics is very complicated, and most of it you can't see, especially at the quantum level. And this is an example of a Feynman diagram. Richard Feynman's diagram, I can't explain this to you. It's quantum electrochromodynamics or something like that. But I can tell you a lot about this diagram because it uses that universal language we talked about. And look how simple this is. It's just a couple of lines. If you can fit it on a cocktail napkin, you understand it. And by the way, you're not going to just understand it. You can spread that idea to other people because they can remember it, and they can get their mind around it. And that simplicity will lead to greater adoption of ideas and help you focus on the problem. Okay, let's talk sports. To me, that's an ironic line. I don't know anything about football, so Uh, and someone might be able to tell me who's playing. We're used to these sort of diagrams, these sort of drawings. We see them on television across the live video screen. Now, I don't know anything about football, but I know about drawings, and I can read this diagram, and I think it's very interesting that if you take away the field and the players and the stands and all the extraneous stuff, the play even comes more clear. I understand it better, and yeah, no, this is going to happen. It's going to work. I'm on the same team. By visualizing this idea, everyone can come together and decide that's the play we're going to run, and we have better chance of success because it's simple, and it's something that can fit on a cocktail napkin. Which brings me to flowcharts. Flowcharts are ways to step through a progressive series of information over time or process. We use them a lot here at Twin. We use them a lot about technology. I'm showing you a diagram which someone drew in the 1960s. It's from Cisco Systems. And I want to give it an example of, well, let's just say I doubt this person is a visual artist. I doubt they went to art school. The lines, the writing tells me that, but that's not what's important. What's important is this is a way of working out ideas, and on this drawing, you can see it's a little small here. TCP timed out, that tells me they're working on TCP/IP protocol. Everyone knows what that is. They're working out fundamental ideas of what would become the internet, and they're doing it using visualization because those ideas need to be worked out beforehand, before all the complex coding that needs to go into making the system real. And eventually, it's going to become the interconnected web of information that we are familiar with. I think it's very important that we can look at this diagram, or this drawing, or this sketch from a distance of, 30, 40 years, and it makes complete sense to us. It's built in, it's who we are, and you can do it. You can use this tool inside of your projects. Okay. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about my own practice. I showed you a little bit of artwork I do. This is my desk in Brooklyn. I make a lot of drawings. I'm going to point out the most important tool, which is my Twin-Text coffee mug. Ooh, Twin. And I also want to point out some of the things I do as part of my practice. On my computer screen, I'm using probably Google Docs or Balsamic or Illustrator or Visio or Sketch or Photoshop. There are an endless array of tools out there on the computer. You're familiar with them. Some of them are free. Some of them are good. They are all going to take you longer than picking up a pencil and putting on a piece of paper. I'm not discouraging the use of those. I'm encouraging you to go through the first step of picking up a very simple tool and getting the idea on paper because it's fast, and it's something you can do without being distracted by the technology. These are some storyboard type diagrams. We'll look at those in a second, but I want to bring your attention to the most important drawing on this table. And the technical name of this drawing is a doodle. I know it doesn't look like much, but keep it in your memory, and we'll return to it in a minute. Storyboards. This is exactly the sort of thing you would expect from a UXer like myself, or from Kim Snyder, or Aaron Louie, or anybody who's trying to visualize a screen. We can bring these into electronic format, make them more formal, make them seem crisp and clean, and add color, and convince the client these are great ideas. It's very, very convincing to do this. But that's not where the ideas come from. The ideas must start with us thinking about the problem. And how do we think about the problem? We visualize it on paper in a way that enables our eyes to see things that our mind wouldn't normally be able to do. Thinking about these systems is complicated. There's lots of moving parts. Things have relationships. Things have to be built. It's a lot of effort. Put it on a sheet of paper, and your eyes will tell you, oh, that's what I need to, oh, there's a problem here. We're missing something. Those problems emerge because we can see them. And you can see here, I'm not afraid of showing you some of my mistakes. I want to show a couple concept drawings from the team. Where's Kurt? Kurt Mannesberger. Oh, there he is. Kudos to Kurt. This is an excellent concept drawing. This is for the Selfio project. It's a mobile app. And you can see here, Kurt has an economy with which he renders the idea. It doesn't matter if he has artistic training. It matters that he's getting the idea across. And by the way, you can hand this to a developer. They know what they're going to do. Our own Aaron Louie, who's maybe joining us from the web. very fluent in embodying ideas in elegant drawings. I also want to put a shout out to Jason. Jason spoke about design thinking. This kind of melds in. And this is a diagram from Jason about how teams can work together. Again, the economy with which we can get this idea across. How do we get rid of all the extraneous chaff and get to the main concept, which is design and development changing order or effort over time. Now I'm going to show you something that doesn't fit on a cocktail napkin. Advisedly, it would be better if it fit on a cocktail napkin, but this is the best I could do at the time. It is, for me, important because it was the first time I did a diagram for Twin where I felt like I really changed something. And I call it a concept map because the goal was to put onto a single sheet of paper every concept, every system object, every noun that we heard the client and their assorted contractors talking about. This was for the Victoria's Secret project about 10 years ago. Some of us remember that. Very complicated. Kevin's nodding. We had stacks of requirement documents, thousands of pages to read. I don't know how many contractors were involved. It was a very complicated situation. And all I tried to do was just get all the main ideas into one sheet of paper. Once I did that, something magical happened. Once I did that, I realized, well, you kind of group these things. It's not that many concepts. And you see relationships between each other. And by the way, I could hand this off to people, and that's how I know this wasn't a good diagram for me. I mean, it's not good because it looks nice and it has some... The reason it was an important diagram is because I would hear from the team, I can use this. I can use this to communicate the idea. I can use this to get my mind around the problem. And the utility of the drawing is important. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care if it's convincingly pretty. What matters is that it's useful to the team. It's useful to our process in that time. Okay. I mentioned this term concept map. I sort of invented, well, I use that term. I'm not sure if anyone else does. But I think of it as a way of getting your mind around the entire system. It's true, we're always building complicated systems. We're often working on parts. How do the parts fit together? You make a map. You make a concept map. What's the main idea of this application? This particular concept map started from our own Katie Velasco, thank you, Katie, on the ATS project known as Allegis. To understand all the nouns they were throwing at us, it was very complicated, and early in the project, we weren't sure how things fit together. But the great thing about paper, wad it up in ball, throw it away, refine it. This is my attempt to refine Katie's diagram. It turns out I did a kind of so-so job. The client, we showed this to the client, and the client didn't like the word client. That was in the wrong place. They didn't like that term. They needed some other stuff. So we had to refine it some more, and eventually we ended up in this sort of lozenge shape diagram, which became formalized, and now we can work off of and build from. But I want to bring your mind back to the memory a few minutes ago when I said that this doodle was important. You can see the similarity of the triangular shape. I think it's interesting. I drew this drawing before we kind of came up with that concept diagram. And it's an example of my eyes working ahead of my mind. I hadn't analyzed it rationally, but my eyes were kind of thinking, so sometimes a drawing can take you places that you don't expect. It's a tool. Our minds work on many different levels. Some of them are very rational. We think we're in control. Some of them are very emotional. Those things are very powerful. And sometimes your ability to put something on paper will reveal something to you about the problem which you might not have thought about. And that's what I'm trying to get across to you. Use diagrams, use drawings to move yourself forward, whether you're programming a specific system, or you're trying to solve a problem, or you're trying to reach a goal, a life goal. There's nothing wrong with drawing a diagram for a life goal. It can get you there and help you understand how to get there. On a whiteboard, if you don't like paper, I like to show this from George, a great little sketch in PowerPoint. It's just very simple, and you'll remember the shape of this. You won't remember all the text that he spent a lot of time typing, but the shape is something that'll stay with you because your eyes are very good. And finally, this concept diagram from Ben Elmore. I don't know if Ben considers himself an artist, but I consider this a great concept diagram. It was again for the Victoria's Secret project. He was explaining something about the way attributes could be like configured across systems, and I think this became known as the Minority Report diagram. I don't even know what this was done in. Do you remember? Visio. Huh. So Visio is useful, who knew? I'm not going to try to convince you that this is intelligible to all of you now or explain it all. That's not its purpose. It had a time and a place. And at that time and that place, this was a tool for us to communicate with each other. Ben said, I have this idea about the way to make these things work. And by using this tool, I came on board, other people came on board, and we were able to move forward through the power of visualization and essentially a piece of paper. So I'd like to encourage you all, as you return to your workplaces, after we take a swim and drink a lot, you'll go back. I'd like you to take a stack of paper, cheap paper preferably, and a couple pencils and put it next to your computer. And when you have an idea that you're trying to think about or something crosses your mind, trying to solve a problem, it's a technical issue, it's kind of complicated, I would like to encourage you to render it. Put it on a cocktail napkin. See if you can simplify it. It doesn't have to look pretty. You can use any method you want as far as annotation. Rough it out. Don't be afraid of the white paper. It's your friend. This drawing is for you. It's not to display. You don't need to do anything artistic. But you might find that what comes out is a more powerful thing than you thought. And you might find yourself visualizing an idea in a way that's very compelling to you and helps you achieve that goal. And by the way, the great thing about paper, and the reason I say you should get cheap paper, is that if it doesn't work for you and the diagram is flawed, wad it up in a ball, throw it in the circular file, get rid of it, start again. Thank you.